Today we are talking about a generation that learned independence the hard way. They then turned that experience into a very specific kind of parenting. I am talking about Generation X. These adults grew up in an era when many homes were empty after school. Making your own snack, doing homework alone, and figuring things out without an audience was not unusual. It was normal. If you were a Gen X child, the message was not always spoken. However, it landed anyway. The message was to be capable. Do not make it a big deal. Handle it. On the surface, that builds real strengths. You learn problem solving early. You learn how to entertain yourself. You learn how to recover when things do not go perfectly. You learn self-control because no one is there to regulate you in real time. However, the psychological cost of being capable can be loneliness. Independence and emotional support are not the same thing. A child can be trusted with responsibilities and still feel unseen. A child can be safe and still feel lonely. Many Gen X adults carry a split internal story. They feel pride in what they survived and learned. However, they also feel grief about what they did not receive. This particularly applies to comfort, guidance, and emotional presence. That is why Gen X parenting often feels like a deliberate correction, not a rebellion. They are not simply doing the opposite of their parents. They are trying to keep the good part, which is resilience. They also want to replace the missing part, which is emotional availability. In other words, they want their children to be strong. However, they do not want them to feel strong all the time. This is where you start to see the signature Gen X balance. Parents are involved, but not hovering. They are waram, but not indulgent. They are protective, but still expect competence. Many Gen X parents will not solve every inconvenience for their child. They will let a child forget their homework one time. They will let them experience the awkwardness of a minor social mistake. They will let consequences teach because consequences taught them. However, they also tend to draw a hard line around real harm. This includes bullying, unsafe situations, serious disrespect, predatory behavior, or emotional cruelty. That is why people sometimes describe them as stealth fighter parents. These parents are quiet in the sky most days. However, they are fast and intense when something crosses the threshold. Psychologically, that pattern makes sense. When you grow up managing yourself, you develop an internal threat radar. You learn to conserve energy. You do not panic over small stuff, because small stuff was always yours to handle. However, when the danger is real, you do not negotiate with it. You simply move. Gen X parents may look hands. However, this is often a strategic hands-off approach. They are watching and listening. They let children build skills while ensuring they know they are present. Much of this connects to two basic ingredients that shape children. These are warmth and boundaries. Warmth is emotional safety. It means being able to go to your parents with fear, sadness, embarrassment, or confusion. Despite this, you still feel accepted. Boundaries provide structure, including rules, expectations, follow-through, and consistent limits. When a parent offers both, children do not just behave better. They tend to develop better emotional regulation. They learn that their feelings are real. They also learn they are still responsible for their actions. That combination is why Gen X parenting often feels firm but fair. Fairness matters deeply to Gen X. Many of them grew up in systems that did not feel fair. They've watched layoffs, recessions, shifting job security, and the early cracks in the promise that loyalty to a company guarantees stability. So their parenting often carries an underlying lesson. The world changes, so build skills that travel with you. Do not rely on luck. Do not rely on someone else's approval. Learn to adapt. This also explains the Gen X internal compass. Many Gen X parents do not parent for applause. They are less motivated by being seen as perfect and more motivated by being effective. They will ask themselves what would have helped them. They also ask what their child actually needs. That is a mature psychological move. It involves using your past as information without forcing your child to relive it. At the same time, Gen X parents are not parenting in the same world they grew up in. They are the first generation raising children in the always online era. Gen X remembers an offline childhood where mistakes were not recorded. Social pressure ended when they got home, and privacy was the default. Their children do not have that by default. So Gen X parents often have a complicated relationship with technology. They are competent enough to use it. They are skeptical enough to question it. They are protective enough to set rules that can feel strict. You will see this in how they handle screens and social media. Many Gen X parents are not just afraid of too much screen time. They are concerned about emotional development. This includes constant comparison, attention fragmentation, dopamine loops, exposure to adult content, and social dynamics that never switch off. Yet, They also know technology is part of modern life globally, providing education, friendships, creativity, and opportunity. So the goal becomes something more nuanced than simply banning or ignoring technology. The goal becomes teaching discernment. It also means teaching boundaries and recovery. Parents teach children how to notice what an application does to their mood and attention. They also teach them how to choose differently. Now consider the pressure many Gen X parents live with. They often belong to the sandwich generation. They are raising children. They are also supporting aging parents, managing careers, and trying to stay financially afloat. This happens in a world that often feels expensive and uncertain. That chronic load can create emotional fatigue, and emotional fatigue changes how anyone parents. When you are depleted, you become either more controlling or more avoidant. You get shorter. You get less playful. You have less patience for normal childhood chaos. What is interesting is that many Gen X parents recognize this and try to name it. They might say that they are not mad. Instead, they feel overwhelmed. That is a psychologically healthier pattern than silent resentment or exploding without explanation. It models emotional literacy. Feelings have causes. We can talk about them without making them someone else's fault. Intergenerationally, Gen X parents can get criticized from both sides. Older generations may look at the emotional presence and say it is coddling. Younger people may look at the rules and say it is strict. Gen X sits in the middle. They often want children to have feelings. However, they do not want feelings to be the boss. They want children to have support, but not dependence. They want openness, but also responsibility. If you want the simplest way to describe Gen X parenting, it is calibrated involvement. It is the parent who gives room for growth and also provides a safe base. It is the parent who believes mistakes are part of learning, but shame is not a teaching tool. It is the parent who can be casual and funny one moment and fiercely protective the next. Beneath all of this, Gen X parents are trying to keep a quiet emotional promise. This promise states that children will not have to earn attention by being perfect. Children will also not have to handle life alone to prove they are strong. Parents will raise children to stand on their own. They will also make sure children never feel abandoned while they learn how. That is the heart of it. Gen X parenting is not just a style. It is a psychological repair project. It involves keeping the independence that built competence while adding the warmth that builds security. It is resilience with tenderness. It is freedom with boundaries. It is letting children learn to fly while making sure they always know where home is.